Welcome to Lucha Underground Rewatch. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a show that John and I have been planning for a little while now. We are going to be watching 4 hours of Lucha Underground Season 1 per week again. And I want to emphasize the again because this isn't our first time seeing the show. If you want to go back and get our first thoughts on these episodes, we have every single episode covered and reviewed on an episode of TwitWow, starting with episode 2 because we covered episode 1 in the episode 2 review, which was actually the first TwitWow for Lucha Underground. I do have a playlist that has every one of those episodes on it, so if you just want to try and marathon through them, it'll take a couple days, but you'll still be able to pull it off. And now we're rewatching them, but not just because we just love the show so much, although that is a big reason. Also because we started picking up on things that maybe we didn't necessarily notice the first time around, and we really want to kind of talk about some of the little hints and the foreshadowing and some of the little things that they do that kind of hint towards something bigger or something that either has already been blown off that, well, obviously we've seen just because we've went through and seen the season, or something that maybe hasn't been blown off yet that we might anticipate for season 2. That being said, though, another big reason we're doing this is to keep Lucha Underground on everyone's minds and remind you all to continue tweeting hashtag Netflix needs Lucha, because the last thing that we want is for this show to end after only one season.
Certainly. I mean, you know my feelings on it, guys. Lucha Underground, I think, is a revolutionary wrestling product. I think it's so far ahead of its time with how it tells stories, how it shoots segments, with even how it has matches, to a degree, as I think we'll see later as we get deeper back into this first season. And I would love to see Lucha Underground get on a platform like Netflix. It seems like a great marriage, considering that Netflix, recently they got a show like Daredevil, which has that similar kind of grit that I think Lucha Underground possesses. So, I think they'd fit quite comfortably. So let's keep the campaign going strong, guys, because this is a show I want to see go on for quite a while.
Absolutely. And say no more as far as the revolutionary aspect of Lucha Underground than the fact that we're rewatching it. Because, I mean, you couldn't pay me to rewatch episodes of Monday Night Raw, even if you really, really wanted to. I don't watch TNA one time, much less twice. And NXT, we might watch their live specials twice, but that's just for the matches. Lucha Underground, we're watching a second time for everything. The matches, the stories, the promos, the commentary, everything that goes into Lucha Underground, especially the matches and the stories, is worth watching more than once.
It's just got an aesthetic that I think if you haven't seen it by now, first of all, what are you doing here? You should go and you should be marathoning through the actual episodes. And B, I think it takes guys like us, or at least I should say it took guys like us that are so used to the WWE style and, our palate's sort of accustomed to that North American style, just completely blows you away. And I want more. I'm not done with this show yet, not by a long shot, and that's why I love that we're doing this rewatch, because we can really point out some of the magical moments all over again, and as you said, really stress to the people that this is a show worth keeping around.
Absolutely. And we actually have somebody on Twitter, at PW Gregory, Paul William Gregory. Once he found out that we were going to be rewatching these episodes, he did the same thing, but he actually took very extensive notes, like to the point that I feel like, I don't know if he typed it out on a Word document or a Notepad document or something like that, but the first episode alone was 2 full pages worth of notes for him. And he actually
Wow.
took a screenshot of his notes and posted them to Twitter. And then episode 2 was another 2 pages. So I don't know if he has any intentions of kind of winding back on the note taking, but I personally took notes of all 4 of the first 4 episodes, and it was 101 lines. So still pretty insane, but on average only about 25, 26 lines an episode for me. 2 pages an episode for him. So we're definitely, we're not the only ones doing this. We would definitely invite all of you guys to go back and watch these episodes along with us. Hopefully in the next few months, you'll be able to go back and watch the episodes on Netflix. But until then, I guess you're just going to have to try and find other ways. We've been kind of just using an assortment of different resources, whether it's, Daily Motion or Now Video, just different stuff like that. Hoping to be able to financially support Lucha Underground via Netflix by just, I mean, honestly, if Lucha Underground gets on Netflix, I probably would buy a subscription to Netflix just to support them.
Absolutely. I think they're worth that. I think
Well,
they're
and I
very
mean,
much
if you
worth
really
that.
think about it, John, the WWE Network is $9.99 a month, and you get all the WWE content you want. Lucha Underground, in my opinion, is significantly better than WWE. And even if you want to go back to the Attitude Era wasn't great because the writing was so much better than it is now. The Attitude Era was great was because the stars. There were stars back then, and they weren't afraid to turn people into stars. Lucha Underground, everyone is a star. In Lucha Underground, everyone has a backstory, everyone has a relevant story arc, a character arc, everything, and everyone can go in the ring too. That's worth noting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lucha Underground with the mythos that they have and the lore of each character. It's just so fun to go back and revisit, particularly the likes. At least with this first review, you'll notice of Mil Muertes in particular. Just so good how they tell stories, and that's just
Yeah.
something that I think Lucha Underground has that leg up on everybody.
Yeah, and like I was saying, WWE Network's $9.99 a month. Netflix would be $7.99 a month for the live streaming. So, freaking a, man, it's cheaper than WWE Network, and it's a better product in my opinion.
Absolutely, without question, my friend.
All right, so if you want to actually get into this review, we can, John. What do you say?
Let's do it, man. You start off since you were the really heavy note taker. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, the first thing to talk about is the first scene in this show. It was amazing because the first scene in the show, when we first watched it, literally we just thought that it was just like, oh, this is a really cool way to kind of introduce people to kind of the cinematic style and the vibe that Lucha Underground has. But now, in hindsight, it's Dragon Azteca saving that white hooded guy that ended up putting on the El Dragon Azteca mask on Ultima Lucha from a bunch of thugs.
Absolutely. Very interesting that it all kind of, this is the beginning of the circle, so to speak, seeing El Dragon Azteca saving that young man from these guys trying to put a hurting on him. And then after he saves him, I mean, do you have anything you want to say about that portion? Because I know it kind of continues from there.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, the great thing too is that when he does save him, he reaches out and he says, "Come with me." And there are two other sort of iconic moments in this series where that exact line is reused. First, when Angela, well, we didn't know she was Black Lotus then, so I'm going to call her Angela Fong in that instance. Before we found out she was Black Lotus, when she was in the trunk of that car, we thought that she was kidnapped by bad guys, and then the trunk opens and it's El Dragon Azteca again, and he reaches his hand to her and he says, "Come with me." And then at the very end of the season, Ultima Lucha Night 2, she kills El Dragon Azteca in the cell, and Dario Cueto unlocks her cell and reaches his hands out and says, "Come with me."
right. So
That's freaking huge.
yeah, man, absolutely. Again, I just love how with this show, even the things that you may think, oh, that's just a throwaway line or this, that, or the other, everything serves a purpose. There is no wasted motion in Lucha Underground, and you see it from the very first scene. That's brilliance if I've ever seen it.
Absolutely. It was amazing. So the El Dragon Azteca then proceeds to tell the new El Dragon Azteca, the guy in the white hoodie, about the seven ancient tribes and that kind of stuff. And then he pulls out the line that he does again repeat with Angela Fong with Black Lotus when he first picks her up. "What do you know about Lucha Libre?" And then we go into the opener, the oh, it's awesome, just so cool. But then when we actually get to the ring, and actually not even getting to the ring, they show a AAA clip of Dario Cueto talking about how he's a businessman opening the doors of his temple, and he tells, I think it was either the promoter or the owner or something like that at AAA, about how, give me some of your fighters and you can have all this money, and he dumps it out in the ring, and it's just like massive heat too because he's got this Spanish accent rather than the Mexican accent, and yeah, like it's great stuff.
Absolutely. I love Dario Cueto. I love the whole feel of the temple. And again, like in the early beginning, you and I got that vibe. It was kind of like a Fight Club thing because Dario Cueto wanted fighters from all over the world, and they wanted to come and congregate at his temple and just fight it out and produce violence.
Yeah, and
It's
this
great,
right
man.
here was why all of the Mortal Kombat parallels started getting made. Because when you think a rich guy bringing all the best fighters in the world to one spot to fight it out to see who's the best, that immediately my mind goes to Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like Dario Cueto is just Shao Kahn overlooking the whole thing. And it's just crazy, the parallels between that, the parallels again to things like Fight Club. It just, again, I think it all comes down to just the aesthetic and how they tell the story. It's just completely revolutionary to everything else you'd see like in an ROH or WWE. Like nothing compares to this at all.
Yeah. So then we go back to Azteca, and he asks the man in the white hoodie if he would, quote unquote, join us. So just that whole thing was great. But then we get into the temple itself, and Melissa Santos welcomes the host, promoter, and owner of Lucha Underground, Dario Cueto, and he comes out and says that this isn't an arena where the kids can cheer for their heroes. It's a temple, his temple. And then he talks about the three statutes that he believes in the most: the courage, honor, and violence. I love that, the way he says that. Brings up the $100,000 that he's going to be giving away tonight, and that people are going to get rich or die trying. And then he says that the first match involves two guys with Lucha Libre running through their blood. And this is when we get into Blue Demon Jr. versus Chavo Guerrero Jr. And I love the feel that they immediately start you with, because even if I hadn't been a Lucha Underground fan, as soon as Dario Cueto says courage, honor, and violence, you've got my attention.
Absolutely. Looking back, I feel like this first promo was so critical because I think, again, and I don't want to speak for the most of the North American wrestling population, but I can say for myself, I could understand tuning into something like this when you're just so used to WWE, when WWE is kind of dominating your palate.
Yeah.
And then you just think, oh, this is just going to be another wrestling show. And then when he says, like, this isn't a place for kids to cheer for their heroes, this is a temple, my temple, it's kind of like he's laying down the gauntlet. And then you as a fan go, okay, prove it to me. And then through the course of that hour, they most certainly do. And it's really right from this first matchup here that we get.
And as far as the Blue Demon Jr., Chavo Guerrero Jr., what I really think is interesting is that there are, on this first show, we have 3 matches. And
Right.
realistically, these 3 matches feel like they could be in the WWE. Like, this first match between Chavo and Blue Demon feels like a WWE match to me.
Yeah.
And then the second match is Son of Havoc versus Sexy Star. The sort of culture shock there is woman wrestling a man. But if you can kind of think back to like when WWE, if they would ever have done a prominent female versus a lower card male, this feels like how they would have handled it. And then you get to Mundo Puma, and that feels like it would be like an NXT event, like an NXT main event. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly, yeah.
So like all 3 of the matches on the first show feel like something that people are familiar with. They feel similar to something WWE would do. And then episode 2, they kind of stray a little bit, and then episode 3, they go full blown like, screw the WWE, this is our style.
Absolutely, which I think makes sense because I think for the pilot,
it's perfect.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like they bring you in and they kind of string you along gradually, and then on that third episode's main event, the triple threat,
right.
is the ultimate shock to your system. Like if you watch that and you think anything to yourself but, oh my god, I need more of this, you're probably not going to get into this show.
Right. And that's just it. I feel like they established the groundwork. Okay, let's take a nice and slow, and then they are off to the races by that third episode with the triple threat. Because I think the triple threat really embodies everything that Lucha Underground is about more than anything else in the first 3 episodes. Because it's just all over the place, and it is Lucha Libre at its finest.
And the crazy thing is, if you think about the 3 participants, by the end of the season, just think about like, okay, so one guy main evented part 1 of Ultima Lucha. One guy was in an amazing borderline match of the year death match, and the other guy is the Gift of the Gods champion now.
Right.
Like that was a triple threat early on in the season.
And it shows you, though, if I can just cut in there, Ashley, with you saying that, just how well Lucha Underground protects its performers. Because remember, the debut of these 3 guys was preceded by a cinematic segment between Dario Cueto and Conan.
Yeah.
And Conan assuring him, man, these are the best fighters in the world, and you're not going to find anybody better.
He even goes as far as to say, if you want to call this place the best, if you want to call your roster the best that the world has to offer, you can't say that unless you have these guys on it.
Exactly, and then look at what all 3 of them did at Ultima Lucha, this year. Especially Phoenix.
And all three won the matches that they were in too. That's worth noting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, none of them lost their matches. All three were winners, so I feel like it really substantiates Conan's claim. It's really the ultimate validation of his
Yeah.
claim, and I just love how going even that far back, they remember that all this time later, and they give such protection to their caliber
Do you
talent.
know
So
what's
it's awesome.
really crazy too? I don't know if you caught this, but it seems like, and I never wanted to say this, I never wanted to admit this, but the whole entire time, Conan was the voice of reason that I thought Vampiro was.
And dude, here's the thing. I'm glad you said it because I was getting ready to say the same. If for no other reason, the whole thing between Puma and Johnny Mundo.
Yeah, exactly. Because not only does he bring in these three amazing luchadors, but he is the manager for the guy that becomes the longest running champion, well, the only champion up until Ultima Lucha. And he basically predicts Johnny Mundo's heel turn.
He does. And I wish I would have listened because I could have gotten so hyped, long before then. But he's absolutely right. I mean, even Cueto, if you want to think about it, kind of said he's only here for the money and the fame. And I'm like, nah, that's totally a heel thing. And Mundo's a babyface, but they're right.
Yeah.
They're absolutely right. That's his motivation, really, for turning is because hey, this guy's taking my spot, and somebody taking my spot means less money and less fame for me. So yeah, Conan really was, and I was always blinded by it because, like you said Vampiro was the voice of reason. I agreed with you, and every time he condemned Conan, I'm thinking, oh man, Conan's doing some dirty stuff, and it didn't help the fact that Conan, at least in the early episode, seemed to be on good terms with Dario Cueto. He seemed to be chumming it up with him. So I'm like, oh, Conan, there's something suspicious there. But you're absolutely right. Really looking back on it and rewatching these early episodes, you know that Conan really was as good a mentor to Puma as he proclaimed himself to be.
Yep.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, and then an even crazier thing is like if you think about Vampiro and his kind of dynamic with Conan, it's almost like he turns into the evil version of Conan at Ultima Lucha.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you want to talk about managers, by the end of this season, there are only going to be two actual. Like I would consider Katrina a manager, but you could also call her a valet.
Right.
Well, the only true managers, if you don't count her, then would be Conan and Vampiro, and those guys hate each other. But Conan has been like the voice of reason all season, and we thought it was Vampiro, but then he ended up being this psychotic Sith Lord by the end of the season.
Right. Right. It just goes to show any preconceived notions, any assumptions you may establish throughout viewing Lucha Underground,
Just toss them
abandon them.
out. Yeah,
Abandon them.
just
Because
throw them out the window, man.
I guarantee you, they may feel comfortable the first week, they become cement shoes by the next.
Yep.
And just no point in holding on to them.
Yeah. All right, so let's kind of get back to chronological order here. We were just talking about Blue Demon versus Chavo. Blue Demon wins with El Pulpo, which is his sharpshooter, pulling the opponent's arm back.
Right.
And then we see the scene with Cueto in his office talking to Conan. Conan's interested in money, builds up Puma. Dario talks about having signed Johnny Mundo to make an example of him and tells Conan that he wants his man, of course referring to Puma, to make an example of Johnny Mundo. And he also says that $100,000 will go to the victor. So then we get a video package for Puma. He was really, if you think about it, he was the first guy to get any kind of individual spotlight because before this, the only wrestlers that we saw were Blue Demon and Chavo. They talk about the 7 Aztec tribes and how each tribe had its own champion. This is Conan speaking, by the way. He says that luchadors that lost got beheaded, which is why the mask is so valuable because it basically represents your head.
Right.
And that Puma's bloodline can be traced back to the most badass Aztec rebels, and that his spirit animal is the jaguar. And I didn't know this stuff. Like, I knew that, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to me that his spirit animal would be the jaguar because jaguars and pumas are not the same thing. But his attire is much more similar to a jaguar than it would be to a puma.
Right.
So that makes sense. I just really kind of have in my notes here that I just learned more about Puma and Lucha Libre than I thought I would.
It's really funny because two things I want to note very quickly. When you hear about Puma's bloodline and kind of his whole, familial roots going all the way back, gave me such great ideas for him for season 2, like his run back to the championship. I really hope we go further into Puma's family line. Maybe he even reconnects with his roots as a way to get back to the top. I don't know with Lucha Underground. I just feel like anything's possible. And the second more general note I want to make, it really does make sense just from this first hype package why Puma was going to be the man. Because I feel like he has such a great story. And here's the big thing, too. He's from Boyle Heights. He's that guy that was fighting on his own, living on his own on the merits of his own physical gifts. And then Conan kind of finds him and again becomes that mentor. So it's like that relatability, like, oh, look at this guy fighting from the bottom, getting to the top, and he's one of us. So, you know, it really makes sense, even from the first video package, that this guy was really being groomed for big things for the first season.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so once we got through that video package, we got Son of Havoc, who debuted as a pretty major heel. I don't know if people remember this. His first opponent was Sexy Star. I have a lot of little like tidbits throughout this 4 episodes worth of notes about how cringy Stryker was on commentary for these first few episodes, mostly when it comes to women, because like, oh, him talking about how, oh, they call her Sexy Star for a reason, just look at her and that kind of stuff. Then he did it with literally every single female. I mean, he did that with her. He brought something up about Evilise later. Talked about Katrina can keep on clapping as far as he's concerned and that kind of thing. Like, really just horning it up here. And I am so glad that he stopped doing that by the end of the season, because
Yeah, we got to give Stryker credit here. Like,
yeah,
he
definitely.
really,
Well,
yeah,
that's why I brought it up. I didn't bring it up just to shit all over him. I brought it up because I want
right.
to point out that he improved a lot as the season went on.
He
And
really did.
honestly, here's my thing. Like, what scares me too is because if somebody who is as socially conscious as we try to be watches this show and they hear Stryker talking like that, they might turn it off. They might just be like, okay, well, this guy's a dick. This guy is a misogynist, and just turn it off and be like, okay, I'm done, and just give up on Lucha Underground then. But what we're trying to say is stick through it. We know it's bad, but he gets better.
He really does, because I can even think back to our early Twitwell reviews, you know, in the first season, and that would be a constant, if not
Heat
heat
of
of
the
the
night.
night, certainly
It
nitpick.
was a heat of the night for the first like 3 times we did Twitwow.
Right, and then I think after that we're just like, okay, let's just keep mentioning it as a negative, just so you know we stay up on it. So yeah, we were very critical.
Yep.
We did not relent, we did not desist,
And that I even
and
made a
yeah,
point of saying I know that this is becoming a running theme here, but I don't want to let up, because when you let up, then that's when it becomes okay, and it's not okay.
absolutely, and it's not, and you know, and it's funny because we are talking about Sexy Star here in Son of Havoc as it relates to Sexy Star, because at least in this episode, I feel like she was the bigger focus because she got the video package.
She
I
did, yeah. She got a video package, and she talked about how she came from a world of abuse. She contemplated suicide. The mask saved her life, and that Lucha Libre showed her that women are as strong and as tough as men, and can kick as much ass as men. She trains for all the women who are afraid. All the women are, and she talked about how all women are sexy, all women are stars, and that kind of stuff. And it was good. It wasn't great, but it was good.
I still love it, even after the second time watching. I think you remember how enthused I was when we did the review of it the
Yeah.
first time.
Yep.
And I'm still a big fan of it all this time later. I still think she's going to have a huge season 2. Maybe not exactly with the tone I expected with how it ended at Ultimate Lucha Part 2. We'll get more into that, I guess, when we
I don't
rewatch
think
it.
she's going to be the Lucha Underground champion in season 2. That seems more like a season 4, 5, 6 kind of thing to me.
Well, you know what? Build up to it. See, that's the great thing about pro wrestling that I think Lucha Underground understands better than anybody else. You're watching the characters progress pretty much from their arrival up to
Oh, and
whatever point
speaking
it's over.
of her being champion, honestly, now that I think about it, I almost imagine Marty the Moth Martinez being Lucha Underground champion before she wins it.
We'll see, man. We'll see. But I mean, I still am absolutely in love with the character. And it's funny, too, because given this first match, you would have thought, oh, yeah, Sexy Star is going to embarrass this guy. Because to me, Son of Havoc looked like a joke. I'll never forget my first impressions of Havoc. I'm like, oh, man, this guy is pretty much as close to that default template you get in a create a wrestler in a video game as you could possibly, you know, fathom. And he ends up getting the win after grabbing the tights.
Yep.
But I couldn't have imagined, I'm sure you couldn't have either, just the fanfare that Son of Havoc would accumulate down the road. But we'll get to that. But yeah, just very strange beginnings for both of them, to
Yep.
be
Hey,
sure.
man, when you're good, right?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. Up next was a backstage segment. Chavo and Dario Cueto. Dario asks him what happened, and talks about, man, I thought you'd get the first victory in my temple, and Guerrero is the greatest bloodline, and that kind of thing. And talks about how, man, you tapped out. What would your grandfather think? What would your uncle think? One thing that's for sure, though, the $100,000 won't be yours. And then he tells Chavo that next week, because of you not retiring Blue Demon like I thought you would, you're forcing me to bring in an opponent who will. And then he says 1,000 deaths might be coming for us all.
and you just see Chavo just kind of still looking straight down, almost contemplating his future. But yeah, little did we know how true that was,
So
especially by the end of the
Chavo
season.
Guerrero not getting the job done against Blue Demon is why Mil Muertes exists in Lucha Underground.
Crazy to think about, man.
How great is that?
Insanity.
Oh man. So then our main event happens. Puma Mundo. And then I've been waiting for this all night just because I wanted to point out this amazing thing that I noticed as it was happening. And I asked John afterwards, and he was like, "No, what happened?" And I told him, and he was like, "Mind equals blown." While these guys were going at it, Matt Stryker had a little soundbite. He said, "You could bet that Puma can go all night long, but so can Johnny." And I am immediately just like, "Oh my god, that's foreshadowing." And it was. And like the fact that he actually used the exact words all night long in a match between Prince Puma and Johnny Mundo, knowing what would happen later in the season, just mind equals.
I think this is the most brilliant use of commentary I've ever seen. I mean, it makes perfect sense for one, because commentators pretty much are the storytellers. They're the bridge between the viewing audience at home and the action in the ring. But then to kind of heighten their function to another level and say, hey guys, why don't you foreshadow events? And I'm not just talking about, when you have your little still shot and you say, hey, this is the tag team match we got coming up tonight. No, 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 no,
Oh,
no, no.
you know this line was straight up fed to Stryker.
Exactly. Exactly.
Someone was in his headset and said, "Hey man, say something about how they can both go all night long."
Exactly, and I'm talking about this was the first foundation for first brick laid down for the foundation of the rivalry of season one in Mundo Puma with
Yep.
this match.
Yep.
So it's absolutely incredible.
And I also kind of want to point out here, I love this. Who won this match, John?
Johnny Mundo,
Who lost this match?
Prince Puma.
Okay, this was the main event of the first show, right?
Correct.
What would you kind of just say was the main event of the first season? Ultima Lucha, right?
Yeah.
What was the first match of Ultima Lucha Night 2?
Johnny Mundo versus Alberto El Patron.
And who won that match?
Johnny Mundo.
And what was the last match of Ultima Lucha Night 2?
Prince Puma versus Mil Muertes.
And who lost that match?
Prince Puma.
So the main event of the first night featured Johnny Mundo winning a match that Prince Puma lost, right?
That's correct, yeah.
The main event of the first season was a show that featured Johnny Mundo winning the first match and Prince Puma losing the last match.
Damn. That circle, though.
Dude, like, I just made that connection while I was watching this, and it blew my mind. And, like, Puma Mundo main evented the first show, and in a roundabout way, they main evented the first season because they were the bookends of Ultima Lucha Night 2. And the great thing is, it was even the same result because Mundo lost his match, Mundo won his match, Puma lost his match, and Mundo beat Puma on the first night. Like, it comes full circle.
Absolutely, man.
I don't even know if that was intentional, but you almost have to wonder because, like, Lucha Underground seems like the company that would want the second most important match to go on as the semi-main event. So why would they have Mundo Al Patron go on first? Well, I think now we know.
Right. Because it just kind of brings everything
Oh, and that's another
together
thing, too.
cohesive.
Mundo made his entrance first. Was that intentional?
Probably.
Mundo's entrance was before Puma, and Mundo won his match before Puma lost his match at Ultima Lucha.
Yeah. I mean, maybe these guys are set to go at it again at season 2. I don't know. I just feel like this is a rivalry that has so much mileage for Lucha Underground, and this was really the first glimpse we got of it was this main event, and it was glorious.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
Man, it was that connection, like those two connections, the all night long thing, and then the Mundo Puma relationship, and how they are the main event of Lucha Underground, no matter how you look at it. I just love that.
Absolutely.
But then Vampiro says some interesting stuff on commentary here. First thing he did was talk up Conan's strategic mind and talked about how he's probably got a copy of Art of War by Sun Tzu in his pocket. But then as the match starts, he says that Conan has an agenda and talks kind of bad about him a little bit. Mundo ended up winning after a standing Spanish fly that he used to set up for the end of the world. It was great. And then as Cueto is getting ready to give Johnny the cash, I love the very how careful they are with language here, because Cueto doesn't say, "Congratulations, Johnny, you won $100,000." He says, "You won this." And then sure, he opens the briefcase, but then Johnny Mundo gets attacked from behind by the crew.
Right.
As
But
if to
very
say, "Congratulations, Johnny, you've earned a beatdown."
exactly. I mean, he did tell Conan, "I want to make an example out of him," and then this is the first time we see the crew,
And
and
then
they
Big
just
Rick just kind of slowly making his way into the ring, just destroys Mundo with a Uranagi slam.
yeah, absolutely. He lays everybody out. Cortez Castro, Mr. Cisco, they do their double team finisher, I believe, to Mundo as well. So he really got beat down. And yeah, this is again the first time
I
we
think
really see the
didn't they
crew.
do that double team finisher to Puma actually?
Was it? But yeah, I think you're right. It was Puma, but they just lay waste to the baby faces, and yeah, just seeing them. And then I love when Dario Cueto's like, "They work for me." Like
Well, he
Dario.
said that he's been scouting the world. Like he said that he said that earlier, that he's been scouting the world for the best fighters, and then he specifies like these guys were the ones that I personally found. Like I love that.
Right.
And then
Dario Cueto's
the closing moments of episode 1. Welcome to Lucha Underground. I love it so much.
absolutely, man.
So then we get into episode 2, right? And this show opens with the crew in the ring introducing themselves. Cortez Castro, and then Mr. Cisco just says that I'm Cisco, but we've been calling him Mr. Cisco since then because I think the commentary calls him Rick, though. Big Rick says something to Johnny Mundo, who hits the ring and attacks the rest of the crew as Big Rick just kind of leaves. So he's not interested in fighting unless he's getting paid. The crew starts grabbing weapons, but then Puma hits the ring. Cueto announces that he's making this a tag team match, and Puma and Mundo promptly win. So even from the beginning, beatdowns and all, the crew were basically the jobbers of Lucha Underground.
Absolutely, they were meant to be, those enforcers for Dario Cueto. Not really very good at their job,
So
but
even early
yeah,
on, you could even say that they were just like a more intimidating version of J&J Security.
exactly.
Yeah. So after that tag team match, though, we got our first Mil Muertes video package, which, I mean, realistically, he was the second guy to get an individual kind of highlight. Sexy Star did get a video package on the first show, so I will say that. I will give her credit for that. But Muertes got more of a cinematic, whereas Sexy Star, it was more of an interview. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was pretty cool. Talked about how 1,000 deaths are coming, and this is Cueto's guy that he brought in to retire Blue Demon Jr. I love that. Then we get our tag match, Chavo Guerrero and Sexy Star versus Ivelisse and Son of Havoc. And this was another example of Striker with really cringy language, talking about how, it was so chivalrous for Chavo to tag Sexy Star in and let her pin Son of Havoc. Like, it's just dumb.
I did like the continuity match wise, Sexy Star getting the pin back on Son of Havoc, given that the first week Son of Havoc
Yeah,
beat
and this
Sexy
was a
Star
good
pretty
way
soon.
to debut Ivelisse, too, because the whole thing with them early on was that she and Son of Havoc were an item.
Right.
So I like that. And she was, in my opinion, she is the best in-ring performer, female, in Lucha Underground right now that we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Evil
She's
East is
probably the
just
best
fantastic.
promo of the three as well.
Oh yeah, Evil East has got it all, and you know that. I mean, when a woman has an ankle injury and she still works through it and is still a compelling part of matchups,
Yeah,
yeah, that just says all you need to know about her.
yeah. So we end the night then with Blue Demon versus Mil Muertes. Mil Muertes wins, but then he keeps on attacking Blue Demon. Chavo comes out and cracks Blue Demon over the head with the chair. Sexy Star tries to help and gets cracked herself over the head with the chair. So this was Chavo's big heel turn. That was kind of the whole point of episode 2, was to turn Chavo heel, introduce Ivelisse and Mil Muertes, and I guess kind of give us formal introductions to the crew.
I would argue that this is one of the first really standout moments of Lucha Underground. It was just Chavo laying out everybody with the steel chair in his heel
Yeah,
turn.
yeah, that really was kind of the first really um, what's the word? Like you could, it really iconic images.
Yeah, especially him hitting Sexy Star with the chair. And I say that because, I mean, again, if
Unprotected.
Unpredictable, and
Oh, I didn't say unpredictable. I said unprotected. The
oh
chair
yeah,
shot.
yeah,
The chair
yeah.
shot was unprotected.
Yeah, it was full on. But again, it's like if you were watching this show and your palate is kind of dominated by that WWE style and whatever, and you're thinking, oh, he's not gonna hit her with a chair, something else is gonna happen. Then he does, full on
Yeah.
to Ashton's point, unprotected. That I think is the
Shock
shock
to the system.
system
Yep.
that brings you full into Lucha Underground. Like episode one laid the groundwork, and you're like, man, great in wing work and this and that. But then this just completely raises the stakes, and it's like, okay, now we're doing something here, and then I think you're just fully on for the ride. So
Again, though,
great
it's
stuff.
also again worth noting. See, episode 2 here, all really just kind of WWE style matches. The only exception, again, is women working with men.
Right.
But other than that, like the in-ring style is very WWE-esque. But then we get to episode 3. This show opens with Cueto and Conan. Like you said, Conan talking about how he's bringing in Phoenix, Pentagon Jr., and Drago. Dario sets up the triple threat main event, and that's our main event for the night. And then Melissa Santos introduces Cueto to the ring, and he even acknowledges. He comes right out and says that people have been telling him, "Oh, there's not enough Lucha and Lucha Underground," and he does an amazing whiny fan voice. And then he says that he's here to give people what they want. He's got Lucha for you. He introduces El Mariachi Loco, which is kind of a hilarious, almost a rib on the fans. And
Yeah.
then we get Bendejo chance, which I thought was great because this is a guy that Cueto claims to have discovered himself outside of the local taco joint. And he says that there's no challenge too big for El Mariachi Loco. And I thought that that was very well chosen language as well, because then out comes Mascarita Sagrada. And no challenge too big, but maybe a challenge too small, right?
Yeah, and I remember from our Twitwow review of this episode how impressed I was with Masquerita Sagrada. This really wasn't a comedy matchup. You
No,
know,
it was a solid David versus Goliath story, really. With eventually Sagrada actually does get the win.
and I love how he gets the win too, because watching it back, it's like he chokes.
It was like a guillotine into a small package.
Exactly. El Mariachi Logo just kind of passes out, and then he gets him in that cradle, that package, and he gets the win. And I'm like, that's how you do it. Because, again, going back to that WWE style, say if it was like Heath Slater versus Hornswoggle,
Or
or,
Torito could do it.
yeah, El Torito. It's like, yeah, maybe there's some athleticism there, but it's always going to be like a horn in the keister spot, and then all these guys just running around, and it would be stupid stuff. I mean, here these guys get down to business. I mean, is there a comedy? Yeah. I mean, very early on, El Mariachi Loco really shows this height differential between him and Mascarita Sagrada. But it doesn't take long for it to kick it into high gear and actually be a fun match.
Yep.
So I really appreciated that.
And once the match is over, Chavo hits the ring and puts the boot to Mascarita. It's worth noting here that Vampiro actually cheered Chavo on.
Right.
He's like talking about how, man, he won me over with that. I thought that was hilarious. But timing wise, it worked out well because then we actually get a Vampiro sit down interview with Chavo Guerrero. He asks him who he really is because he's trying to figure out what the Chavo Guerrero identity is separate from just the Guerrero name. And Chavo says that he's been doing it the Guerrero way out of respect, but he's not going to be doing that anymore. He says that Blue Demon Jr. is living off of his father's legacy. He is tired of being brought in as the opponent, and that he is bringing violence, which is what Dario Cueto wants. He then goes on to say that he doesn't hate Blue Demon. He just hates that for a second he thought the Blue Demon was better than him. And then another thing that I love here with the language that they use, he says, "I'm here to stay." How great is that? He was the first
Yeah.
person to get booted from the temple.
That's a great point. I really love the fire from this promo here, watching it again, because you can tell, like, when he says, I hate being the opponent and all that stuff, I think he's partially shooting there,
Yeah.
talking about his time in WWE just always being, like, either the current jerk or the guy that made other guys look good. In fact, I think I remember from an interview with Chavo, I forget who he was working with, but he
Sin
got so
Cara, probably.
it may have been Sin Cara, it was somebody, and then he gets disgusted, and I think he goes straight into Vince, and he says, do you think I'm good at what I do, or just along those lines? And they say yes, and then he's like, why are you using me like this when I know I could be more? I know I'm better than that guy. And yeah, for him to just go and make the statement he made in Lucha Underground, just so great to see how it all ended out in the long run.
I love it, man. It's a really good example of Lucha Underground acknowledging WWE without ever coming out and actually saying anything about WWE directly.
Right, which is the intelligent route. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would cringe when TNA would mention WWE by name. And Lucha Underground, they know how to mention them while still keeping the focus on their brand. You know, the brand they're trying to build.
And like freaking
Yeah,
Josh Matthews, he would actually like talk about people's credentials and mention WWE championships when he was in TNA.
right. It's just that stuff is infuriating to me. You
Yeah,
know, there's no
it's
point for that.
it's bad, but I think Lucha Underground gets it right.
Absolutely.
So up next, we had Chavo walking down the hallway backstage, meets up with Conan, and this is kind of like that infamous warning scene where Conan tells Chavo that La Raza in Mexico found out about Blue Demon Jr. and Mascarita Sagrada, and he basically just tells Chavo to dip, become extinct. He says they're coming, and then he leaves, but then the lights flicker, and Mil Muertes shows up. And this, I think this is interesting because Katrina tells Chavo that he took something that didn't belong to him and that Mil Muertes doesn't forget and that one day Chavo will belong to Mil Muertes. I love this because this is like a hint for something that could happen in season 2.
Absolutely, because from what I recollect, Mil Muertes never did come to collect
No,
on Chavo Guerrero.
he didn't. And that's great because that means that, to me, that might even mean that he's turning heel or Mil Muertes is turning face in season 2.
Could be. I mean, see, it's very interesting given how Ultima Lucha Part 2 ended. You don't know how long that run of dominance is going to last for Mil Muertes, but maybe Chavo is going to kind of meddle in it and be the reason it comes undone. Who knows? I just don't think that the beef between these two is settled, and it's just very interesting looking back and thinking, well, maybe Mil does still have more to do despite what he's already accomplished, especially again in Ultima Lucha Part 2. So we'll see.
And the whole thing with Cueto at the very beginning of the show, introducing Blue Demon and Chavo as a couple of guys that have lucha libre in their blood, that honestly gave me like a different perspective on Chavo turning heel to join the newly turned heel Blue Demon Jr. at Ultima Lucha, because it's like they have that relatability. Like they both have families that have deep embedded their names into lucha libre culture.
Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting given who they kind of joined forces against. A guy like Tejano, who
Yeah.
also kind of has that blood and that strong bloodline and roots to Mexico. So it almost seems like the enemy of my enemy, you know, is
But
kind
I
of a
think
friend.
that it might also have something to do with the fact that Tejano kind of abandoned Mexican culture. Because if you see him, he walks around with a bull rope and a cowboy hat. It looks like he's trying to be an American.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I think Blue Demon took offense when he says, "I'm Mexico,
Yeah.
you're not." And now
But
him and Chavo, these veterans, just coming together in the name of their family legacies. So that could be a very interesting story for season 2 as well, especially if they do cross paths with Mil Muertes. So we'll see.
absolutely. Up next, Mil Muertes just basically murders Ricky Mandel. Before the match started, though, we got another Mil Muertes video package. I didn't write this down before, or if I did, I didn't remember it. Mil Muertes' name before the earthquake. Did you catch it, John?
Pablo something?
Pascual
Pascual
Mendoza.
Mendoza. I wonder if his and see that was something that made me very curious about Mil Muertes in season 1, and especially now that he's on this tear, you know, you got to figure what's going to stop Mil Muertes. And notice I said what and not who, because maybe he will have a confrontation with his past. Because what happened to him was very traumatic. I mean, this earthquake that just kills his parents and everything he cares about, and then he grabs the stone as kind of like a reminder of that trauma. You know, I find that when you think about monsters like that, monsters with that kind of lore, it's normally in confrontation with the past or that trauma that things really start to come undone. So I wonder if Mill is ever going to have to make peace or kind of reconcile with his past in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was all very, very interesting. I mean, we've seen it before, and we kind of remembered the whole story about the rubble, but getting the real name of Mil Muertes, I think, really almost humanizes him. And I don't know if it's in a good way or a bad way, but it's definitely interesting.
Well, I think it's definitely in a good way, Ash. And I mean, hell, if I may, I mean, if you think about any kind of horror lore, Michael Myers started out as a young boy that was just very psychotic and needed help. Jason Voorhees was a kid teased at summer camp and he became a monstrosity. The fact that there's a humanity there makes it all the more eerie because it shows that maybe one day we could become like those monsters.
And I
Because
think another thing that too is it shows that maybe that's why he was weaker when he had his feud against Phoenix, because he still had that human side, but then when Phoenix killed him and did the shut the coffin on him and killed him with the grave consequences thing, and he got revived, he shred whatever humanity, or shed, I guess it would be, shed whatever humanity that he had.
absolutely, and he was just a completely undead, not just partially, but full on. So yeah, it shows that Mil Muertes is now really a monster because there is no humanity left,
Yeah.
and that
How
really
else would
says
he
a
have
lot.
kicked out of the 630? Come on now.
Exactly. Well, and isn't that funny, Ashley? Because you say that, and it's like no human being has ever kicked out of the 630. Well,
Yeah.
Mil Muertes ain't human, so there you go.
I love that, man. Yeah. So up next we get the badass Johnny Mundo segment where he beats up the crew outside Cueto's office and storms in and says that he wants a match with Big Rick and tells Cueto that when I'm done with Big Rick, you're next.
I love it, man. I love it. As a Johnny Mundo fan, that's the most exciting part about going back and watching this first season. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to read people saying that like this is the best work of his career across the board. Whether it's Stone Cold Steve Austin or other people watching Lucha Underground, it is great. And I think it all really kind of started, here. The matches with Puma and then segments like this really giving him a chance to put those acting classes to good use. And I loved it. Here's the password, super kick. And just great stuff, man. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And the next scene too was great because they go right from that to Cueto paying Rick a big old fat cash bonus, basically just to hospitalize Mundo the following week.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Cueto's like, I'm shutting this shit down immediately.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
so smart too because it's like Mundo just got done being like, okay, as soon as I'm done with Rick, I'm coming for you. And Cueto's just like, okay, how do I avoid this? Oh, Big Rick is a scary son of a bitch. Let's pay him a little extra, give him a little extra incentive to make sure that Mundo isn't around to come after me. Like,
I'd see, dude. That's the thing because it's like Cueto didn't even get threatened to the same degree that Seth Rollins did, say by Randy Orton. And yet all he needs is a thinly veiled threat like, oh, I'm coming for you. You don't need to fill in the dots like, coming for me for what? To drink tea, to exchange Christmas cards? No, he's going to beat your ass. Like,
yeah,
and Cueto knows that. So
yeah.
he's like, oh, shit, Rick, take care of this. And then, he pays him. Whereas Seth Rollins, I mean, Randy Orton went into detail about what he was going to do, and then Seth did that cackle, and you all know what happened after that. Exactly, like, oh, Randy, you jokester. Yeah, not really. Don't be stupid.
Yeah,
See,
exactly.
everybody could learn from Dario Cueto here.
Exactly. Absolutely. So after this, we had our another video package profile thing for Prince Puma, which is pretty cool. But then we get into our main event. Phoenix, Pentagon, Drago, they tore the house down. There's no denying that. This was an incredible match. Phoenix just kind of reaffirming that he was, in fact, the first person to ever jump off of Cueto's office. Just amazing stuff.
Dude, they gave it their all in this triple threat. I loved it. Still love Drago's aesthetic and just his whole look, the tongue and everything else. I'd still say he was the coolest looking character of season one for my money,
Yeah.
without question. And yeah, these three guys tore the house down. It's amazing to think that when they came in, we really didn't know anything about them. They were just three luchadors. It was really wrestling for wrestling's sake, if you think about it, because Conan was really touting these guys, and it's like, okay, go and have a great wrestling match. But then the characters that all three of these men would become, absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah. And the finishing sequence was pretty bonkers too because Drago ate two pile drivers. First, a package pile driver from Pentagon, and then a Samoan driver from Phoenix. And then Pentagon and Phoenix were basically the only people left because Drago was basically dead at that point. He rolled out of the ring and everything. Phoenix hit a poison Rana on Pentagon for the win. So just a nuts match. And this really is the first match. I mean, Puma versus Mundo was amazing, but this is really the first match that I would encourage people to go out of their way to find.
And I remember you did the same on our Twitwell reviews. I think you were so taken with this triple threat, and it's funny to see that Phoenix won because it just really gave you a hint of the trajectory that this guy was going to be on. And yeah, I remember really for a long time throughout the season. I don't know what match finally overtook it, but you were very high on that triple threat.
Yep.
So yeah, it's
And
great
well,
to have
and the crazy thing too is if you think about the match itself, like Phoenix pinned Pentagon. So if you had to list these guys in like a tiering, Phoenix would be at the top, then Drago, then Pentagon, right?
right.
Well, Pentagon was the only guy out of these three to never get a Lucha Underground Championship match.
That is true. That's a great point.
Phoenix won the Gift of the Gods. Drago main evented night one of Ultima Lucha. Pentagon, say what you will about how amazing his match was, there wasn't really that much on the line.
No, there wasn't.
It wasn't a high stakes match. It was just an I want to beat the shit out of this guy match.
Right. It's like I want to make a sacrifice to my master, and we
Right.
don't know how that worked out, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the continuity is so prominent here too, because again, Phoenix by the end of season one was a champion. Drago didn't hold any major kind of accomplishments, but he did main event part one of Ultima Lucha. And then Pentagon's kind of at the bottom of the barrel where, yeah, he had an amazing match, but he didn't really have anything to show for it.
Absolutely. So it really is like guy who gets the winning decision reaps the greatest reward. The guy that wasn't a part of it, well, that's kind of silver. And then the guy who gets pinned, well, he's pretty much here. Not necessarily a bad place, but relative to the other two, not the greatest.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Amazing. For them to finish off season 3, we got a cinematic, the first ever hint at Matanza. Dario Cueto talking to seemingly himself in this room that has this jail cell in it, and then next thing you know, he says, Johnny Mundo thinks he can threaten me. I will not be intimidated by anyone, not even you, and you see the shadow
of Matanza. Yeah, great way to end the third episode.
And that really, between the match and that's the hook right there. That's why I said, if you can get through episode 3 without getting that, oh my god, I need to see more of this feeling, this show probably isn't for you.
Certainly. Yeah, episode 3 is really the indicator between the main event bout and then what would become, in my mind, the most prominent story told through cinematics of season 1.
And that's what's so great about the Matanza story, too, is that if you just showed up to the tapings and didn't watch the show, you don't even know who the hell Matanza is.
Right.
Or Black Lotus. You don't know who either one of them are. Or El Dragon Azteca.
Yeah, you're just unfamiliar with all of it. So there is a benefit to watching, either when you get back, on El Rey or on any kind of streaming site or whatever, so that you can get filled in on the story. Because it is
preferably
such an
Netflix. Hashtag Netflix needs Lucha.
Absolutely. Come on, Netflix. Get with it, man. You don't know what you're missing out on. But it's an amazing story without question.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we get to episode 4. The home stretch, brother. And this was our first episode that we got with a band playing us into the temple. We didn't get a nameplate for them like we would later on, and we didn't actually find out who they were. But I think that this was them kind of trying to tweak the format to try and figure out what works.
Absolutely.
And this did work, obviously. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have kept it.
Right, yeah. I think
it sets the mood immediately. This is not your typical wrestling show.
I love it. It was like, with each passing episode, they were really coming into their own with it. Something a little bit different, shedding that WWE skin. Exactly. Just amazing.
And commentary immediately brings up Chavo Guerrero, and then Sexy Star, who we get in the ring, calls out Chavo, calls him a stupid coward in Spanish, estúpido cobarde. And then she said that she's going to embarrass him for what he did to Blue Demon Jr., kick his ass for what he did to Mascarita Sagrada, and for putting his hands on her, she's going to end the Guerrero dynasty with her bare hands.
Absolutely. I love the fire of Sexy Star, the conviction from which she spoke, not afraid to call out Chavo, not afraid to be kind of an avenger. And that was kind of Sexy Star's role in my mind, predominantly for season 1, until she really just had to focus on her own battles, and there is plenty to focus on, was being an avenger of her fallen friends. So I felt like that was a really good role for her, especially given the tone of her first video package. But then Ivelisse interrupts, and she seems to disagree with Sexy Star here.
Well, she gets absolutely nuclear heat just by showing up and trying to talk.
Absolutely. And she says, "Shut up, I'm talking,"
Yeah.
which, I know you and I both loved. And then she
She's
says,
great though. Like her promo here was way better than I remembered.
"Oh yeah,
She talked about how Sexy Star hides her ugly face with that ugly mask and talks about how deep, deep down in her core, she knows that Evilise is the baddest bitch in the building. And then she blows her a kiss, and then Sexy Star proceeds to slap the taste out of her mouth.
yeah." And then they proceed to have a pretty solid matchup of
This
which,
match was so good. The only thing disappointing about it was commentary and the finish.
yeah, commentary.
Commentary got kind of annoying in this match. Mostly Striker, but again, he does get better. But the finish was so disappointing because it was just a roll up, man. I wanted a finisher. I wanted them to tell a whole story here.
Well, I'm glad you said that because again, going back to our Twitter reviews, because it's funny how much I remember from our conversations in the more formal reviews as we do this rewatch. And you remember one of my nitpicks about Sexy Star was I felt like she didn't have a definitive finisher. Like she was one of those more hiccup wrestlers. And the hilarious thing is, I feel like she didn't really resolve that issue until the final few episodes because we
When
see
she
that
got
these
that
La
when
Mistica
she
armbar.
yeah when she started using La Mistica.
Yeah, which I'm cool with. I mean, I even told you I really didn't give a damn about locker room codes or this, that, or the other, just
Yeah,
so long as
yeah.
she had something for a
I'm cool
finisher.
with it as long as Mysticis doesn't show up.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's just funny because really, for a long time, starting at this point, she really is kind of like catch 'em kind of hiccup wrestler, roll up, pinning combination, whatever.
Honestly, I
Uh,
would have been cool if Evilise would have won with that Dragon Sleeper DDT that she did.
that was so cool looking. I wish she would have gotten the win after that because it seemed like something that could have put Sexy Star away. But again, they really seemed intent on building Sexy Star as kind of like this heroine of Lucha Underground, which is fine, especially considering that in all honesty, I still feel like Evilise came out, the better of the two given what she got to do.
Yeah,
But yeah, just it is kind of frustrating when you go back and you think, man, that roll up really.
yeah,
But yeah, when you know where both women go, it's alright.
exactly. After this, Cueto steps up to Drago in the restroom and talks about how last week you didn't lose, but you didn't win either. And he doesn't want to waste his time, so tonight he would be the first opponent for King Cuerno. And just remembering this whole feud gets me excited because I know that they have that amazing last man standing match, and I can't wait for it. Pentagon Jr., though, this was great. Cuts a promo. In Mexico, no one respects me. Not the fans, not the bosses, not even the other Pentagons. Mr. Cueto, thank you for finally giving me the respect I deserve. And after I take care of some unfinished business, what I'm going to do to Phoenix is just an example of what will happen to whoever wishes to confront me. Because my name is Pentagon Jr., and everyone will respect me. Zero fear. Cero miedo. And man, he's right. From what I understand, he was doing nothing in AAA before he came to Lucha Underground. And like 5 days after this episode of Lucha Underground aired, he joined Los Perros de Mal, one of the top heel factions in AAA.
Right. It's funny because looking back at this promo and given what we know about Pentagon Jr., not just his story, but his trajectory for the first season, even being the big Johnny Mundo mark that I am and really coming into my own and appreciating King Cuerno, which you were on that train long before anybody. I feel like you were the conductor of that train, but we will talk a lot about King Cuerno during this series. I think Pentagon Jr. is my favorite character to follow. Really thinking about everything he's been through because I think what he was really looking for, despite how sadistic he is a sense of family. I mean, yeah, it's morbid, it's twisted, but I think he is looking for that companionship, that respect, that familial relation. It's just I don't think any of us would have expected how he ended up finding it. I
Yeah.
mean, he went so far to. I mean, here's my thing because most people would think I don't know, John, that's kind of a reach. But to me, you've got to be pretty desperate to find it when you're willing to be subservient to another human being or entity and call them master and be in servitude.
Well, and if you really think about it, it seems almost like by the end of the season, he didn't even know who his master was.
Yeah,
Because on that last match, when it was over, he said, "Master, where are you?"
yeah, and then when Vampiro reveals himself, you could just see the
He
eyes
looked
of Pentagon, like
surprised.
surprised but happy though. Like
Well,
his
yeah,
eyes
and
like
that's the
lit up.
thing. Like he looked surprised, but at the same time, he fully embraced it because somebody finally accepted him.
Exactly. So really Pentagon Jr., it's that story about a guy just trying to find somebody to acknowledge him by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And
It
here's
was
the
a
scary
freaking
thing.
cry for help, man. It was a cry for attention.
Yeah, and you think it was more emotional, but considering how violent Pentagon was just to attain attention, how violent do you think he's going to become to keep it now that he has it?
Yep.
And, that's what I think makes him so enthralling a character for season 2. So really knowing that this is where it all started, Pentagon Jr., yeah, I think is one of my favorite narrative characters in Lucha Underground. Just so awesome.
Yeah. From what I understand, the reason that Lucha Underground got Drago and Pentagon is because AAA didn't want them. They just didn't care. They basically just thought those guys sucked.
Well, their loss, our
Exactly.
gain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, man, so good. But then we got Pentagon Jr. versus Phoenix. This was a really solid match. Phoenix ended up winning with a top rope Spanish fly, but I want to point out Pentagon Jr. had a shoulder up for most of this count.
Yeah.
Did you notice that too?
I think I think I did notice it. I just don't know if it's just like, oh, he just looks so out or whatever. That's just how his body looked. I don't really know how they handled that. Maybe it was just one shoulder was down and the other wasn't, and they counted the down shoulder.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's
I don't
that's
know.
that's what it was. The referee was out of position, man.
Yeah, come on, ref. Pentagon Jr.
I think it was referee Rick Knox, man. What are you doing?
Pentagon Jr. just got done cutting a promo saying nobody respects him, and then you don't even take notice of him when it matters most in the context of a match. Jesus, man, way to
Just
fuel his
wants to be
complex.
loved.
Yeah, way to fuel his complex. No wonder he started killing us all. Jesus.
No wonder he started ending careers with broken arms.
You won't want to count this shoulder. Count this shoulder. Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? Ah! And then, that's pretty much that. So, yeah, Rick Knox, man, the original villain.
Yep,
Jesus, man.
that's right. He started separating shoulders because his shoulder was separated from the mat, but it didn't count.
Exactly.
So up next, we got, and I didn't even remember this, dude. Ken Cuerno had a video package here. I did not even remember this happening. And it was so good, too, because, like, he was talking, and he speaks perfect English, which I thought was great. Nice and convenient for the ignorant, non-Spanish speaking fans that watch Lucha Underground. He says, what you call savage, I call survival. What you call evil, I call a way of life. You call me a predator, I call you prey. I loved this. And can I just say, too, that Ken Cuerno is literally my dream gimmick for what Leo Kruger could have been.
I know, and it's funny you say that because I read a tweet from Adam Rose that said that Leo Kruger is gone and we all have to deal with it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I don't even
yeah.
care anymore because we have King Cuerno.
And that's just it, though, because I was getting ready to say, if King Cuerno isn't Lucha Underground champion at some point in season 3,
Oh, he will be.
there is
Season
something.
3. He might be in season 2.
See, dude, we'll get to that.
You want to know why I say that?
Why do you say that?
Because I think Mil Muertes is turning face, and I think King Cuerno then could potentially win the Gift of the Gods from Phoenix, who he's clearly targeting based on the last 5 minutes of Ultima Lucha Part 2.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure we'll have a talk, when Ultima Lucha concludes. We'll have a nice conversation about the World Championship. I just don't think now is the time.
Yeah.
But I will say, King Cuerno, to me, has everything. Now, again, I can't say enough. Ashton was on this bandwagon long before I was. I was never a hater of King Cuerno.
This match was what sold me on him, too. The first match I ever saw him in was this one, and I was immediately sold. I immediately bought in. He is so good.
Yeah, I never hated King Cuerno, but I never really got Ashton's just full-on fandom, like really deep into him. And towards the end of the season, it really clicked for me. Yeah. I mean, this guy is so good in ring. Love the character from the start. It was great rewatching this because you're right, Ashley speaks perfect English, which is great for marketability, let's be honest.
You know what? I think King Cuerno is the character. Like you said, you're really enjoying following Pentagon Jr. just as a character, like throughout the whole thing. That's how I feel about King Cuerno because, like, I want to go through and see each one of his feuds, what his motivations are for each feud, and how we arrive at him in the Gift of the Gods and targeting Phoenix.
Yeah, man. I mean,
because this first feud, he's hunting the dragon, right?
Right.
That, like, and they even say that in the match when Cuerno comes out. Vampiro says Cuerno means horn, and he's a hunter, so he takes trophies, and he's here to hunt the dragon.
Right. And it's funny because in the context of that feud, I remember some of the fantasy booking you and I were doing. I thought they were going to go to the extreme, and King Cuerno was going to be kind of like that ultimate heel, bestowing the ultimate dishonor on these guys and taking their masks.
Yeah.
Like the masks is going to be the trophies. In hindsight,
And especially after that video package where Conan was even telling us about how mask represents the head.
exactly, exactly. But in hindsight, because I remember you kind of shot down the idea. I don't think you were that enthralled with it. And in hindsight, I'm really glad they didn't go that route anyway. Because I think that's being too out and out about it. Like, hey guys, I'm a hunter. See, I'm taking the man. No, it's more of a psychological mindset than like a literal manifestation. And I
Yeah.
really like that about King Cuerno.
And Drago did win this match with the Dragon's Tail pin attempt combination thing.
Yeah, man.
But what I love too is that after the match, Cuerno pops up and he is pissed. And as Drago is kind of running away, backing away, whatever you want to call it, Cuerno points at him and does the throat slit.
I remember you and I the shock we had seeing that Dragon's Tail pin for the first time. We didn't know
Yeah,
what to make of it.
we
But
marked out so much. Oh, that was so good.
I think it was the perfect finish looking back because it was just King Cuerno getting caught, and then what you just got done saying, King Cuerno able to sell being pissed, and then pretty much tell Drago, this isn't over. Like, man, that's the kind of match that I think really makes both guys. And this is a great feud for Lucha Underground early on in the season.
Yep. So then up next we had Puma working out, and Conan shows up and tells him about how tonight's main event is Big Rick versus Mundo, and just reminds Puma that it's not his fight and that he should stay out of it. So then we get into our main event, Rick versus Mundo. No finish here because the crew comes out and attacks Mundo after attacking Puma in the back, so Puma can't really come out and help. And yeah, that's pretty much how we close.
Yeah, that's the one thing that really stood out to me in this match. I don't think they've ever really done it since. Like, a match was interrupted with a cinematic segment.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the few times, if the only time, we really saw that this season, and I really like that. I thought that was quite clever. And then, yeah, as you
good use of the cinematic.
absolutely. And then, as you said, the crew pretty much stands tall. And I just remember being so impressed with the booking of Big Rick because they really got him right, as opposed to WWE that I think wanted to straddle the line too much between humanity and monster when he was Ezekiel Jackson. Big Rick, I mean, it took so much to take him down, and even then, it didn't matter because he stood tall at the end of the night. So with the crew, so just great stuff here.
I think another thing that I absolutely love about Lucha Underground, and we can kind of move on from talking about the chronological part of the show because that's over now. I love that they don't try to act like they're a sports company. Like, sports usually try and put up this front, like, oh, let's go interview this athlete. And they, like, with like in the NFL, on the sidelines, they'll have sideline interviews. And, like in WWE, they try to replicate that with their backstage interviews, their in ring interviews, that kind of stuff. They don't have any, like, um, any real interviewer characters in Lucha Underground. Everyone everyone's character development either happens via video packages in the ring or a sit down interview with Vampiro, which is treated more as a documentary style interview than let me shove this microphone in your face and get your opinion.
I love that too, by the way. If I could just say, like, I love the style of the Vampiro interviews
Yeah.
where it's more relaxed. They're sitting in these. It's almost like they're having a conversation and a camera just happens to be there.
No,
I
see,
really love it.
I don't even see it that way though. It's, to me, it's like what you would imagine, what you would see if like Conan O'Brien had an interview with a Hollywood director,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I really love that. I agree with you. Lucha Underground, I think, is very comfortable in its own skin. I think you said it best. It's a TV show about a wrestling show. And, it doesn't try to be anything more than that because it's so good at being that.
Yeah,
You
to
know,
me, Lucha Underground has a lot more in common with like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones than it does with WWE, ROH, TNA, that kind of thing.
and that's certainly not a bad thing considering the success of shows like Breaking Bad and
Right,
currently with Game of Thrones.
right.
So, I think again it's so ahead of its time because it says, hey, we have wrestling matches, but we're not really a show about wrestling. It's just really wrestling, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I do believe it to be true. It's only a small morsel of what Lucha Underground is really all about.
Yeah.
Because there's a grander mythos here at work that really you can't resolve in the ring. Like For example, if Black Lotus was going to kill Matanza, do you think she's going to wait for a sanctioned match? No, she's going to do it in a
Well, if it
cinematic
was up to
segment.
Chavo, she would have.
Yeah, if it was up to Chavo, she would have. But in Lucha Underground style, you can imagine that they would have done it in that kind of grindhouse style, cinematic segment somewhere, really like kind of deathmatch looking place. And yeah, they just go at it. It's not always going to be resolved in a wrestling ring, and I really like that. I don't know, Lucha Underground, man. I don't know what Netflix is doing, but they need to get on and they need to work a deal out because Netflix certainly needs Lucha, without question.
Yeah, exactly. So I just really wanted to point that out. I love the style, the grittiness, really everything about Lucha Underground that makes it different is
Yes.
just another thing on that massive list of things that I love about it.
Absolutely. I mean, in an age, and I believe this adage to be true with each passing day. It only grows stronger in its truth. There's nothing new under the sun. You know. But I think Lucha Underground realizes how can we make the wheel of professional wrestling even better?
Yeah.
And then the answer is by not making it professional wrestling. And then you
Exactly.
kind
Well,
of,
that's the thing, though. I even said this. Someone on Reddit was talking about Lucha Underground, and I just came out with, to me, Lucha Underground is professional wrestling taken to the extreme. And they confused that with, oh, haven't you ever heard of ECW or CZW? And I was just like, no, 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 no. Wrong definition of extreme. I'm not talking about hardcore. Lucha Underground is everything that sets pro wrestling apart from any other kind of art or sport in the world and cranking those elements up to 11, right?
absolutely.
Because what separates pro wrestling from TV dramas is the athletic feats. The fact that it's basically stunt work done consistently nonstop for 10, 15, 20 minutes, or I guess in Puma and Mundo's cases, 60, right?
Right.
So Lucha Underground says that's what separates us from TV dramas. Let's crank that up. Let's get the most exciting acrobatics that we can possibly fit into here, into our TV show, and let's just showcase those. So that's how we get the Phoenix and the Aerostar and the Drago and the Pentagon and the freaking Angelico jumping off buildings and Phoenix getting power bombed through a building and that kind of stuff. Like the physical feats are so much greater in Lucha Underground than they are anywhere else, and that separates it even more from TV dramas. But then you look at, okay, so what separates pro wrestling from sports? And that it's the predetermined outcomes and the storylines, right?
Right.
Lucha Underground takes that to the extreme as well because they have these incredible, continuous, smart storylines that make sense, that have logical and smart payoffs, that give people what they want to see, and that really does separate them from sports. And so you combine those elements and kind of add this awesome, like grungy grindhouse kind of theme to it with that Robert Rodriguez magic touch. And it really is my favorite thing going today. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I think Lucha Underground, even after just one season, is probably my favorite wrestling promotion ever.
Certainly. I mean, you're not going to get any arguments from me. I mean, as far as cranking those storytelling elements up to an 11, the most compelling character for me of season one was a character that didn't even step foot in the ring, that being Matanza.
Oh,
You know, like just what are we gonna see of this guy? What's gonna happen with this guy? And then the payoff at the end of season one, it was exciting because I'm like, oh my, like I popped big for it. But in the grand scheme of things, it really wasn't a lot. But I love it for that because they're still holding their hand.
yeah.
They know that this is a long game with Matanza, but that's what I'm talking about. Like this isn't a story that's going to be resolved by, oh, get him in the ring. No, it's just knowing what Matanza is. That's a payoff in itself. That's what makes Lucha Underground so distinct from everybody else. To your point, Ashton. So I absolutely love this show.
And another thing that I love, and I think people don't even realize how much of an asset that this is, the fact that it's not live. And I know
Yes.
that causes the issue of spoilers, but you don't have to see spoilers. Like you can avoid spoilers if you want to. If you just put a little bit of effort into, oh, look, somebody posted a thread on Reddit that has the word spoilers in the title. I should probably not click that. just that little bit of effort is all it takes to not get spoiled by this stuff. We got the only thing that I was spoiled on as far as Ultima Lucha goes was knowing the order of the card. That's it.
Right.
And I love that we go so far out of our way to avoid spoilers. It's almost like a game for us, right? Because like you can't look at Wikipedia pages for these guys. And like, good God, the amount of Wikipedia searching that we do during our G1 Climax commentaries is absurd. But we avoid Wikipedia for Lucha Underground talents because of spoilers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I only went on the Wikipedia like once just to kind of learn about the roster, and I'm thankful I really didn't encounter any spoilers. Season 2, I can't wait, for when Netflix picks it up, because
Yeah.
again, Netflix get on it.
And that's crazy too, because like I was thinking, I was even thinking, how could we improve Lucha Underground? And the first thing that came to my mind was fewer episodes per taping so that they could have more tapings, so that they could spread the tapings out, so that they went further into the year, so that they didn't have the entire season finished by April,
Right, yeah.
That's the only thing that I would want them to do. And even then, I don't even know if I would necessarily want them to do that, because then they have more opportunities to second guess themselves, and I think that it's perfect the way they did it.
Oh, yeah. Here's the thing that you're probably going to notice with this rewatch, guys. I don't think there was one really bad episode of Lucha Underground. There are sometimes we go meh with a Raw, or it was outright horrendous. I don't even ever remember feeling meh about Lucha Underground.
There were a couple episodes, I want to say in like April or May, that I was kind of iffy on, but that was just holding it up to the scope that is Lucha Underground, holding it up to the scope that is professional wrestling, and it was still great.
Absolutely. And I think that's all you need to hear was what Ashton just said there, and dude, the payoff of Ultima Lucha. I can't wait to rewatch Ultima Lucha with you.
Yeah, dude. And that's another thing too, is that we still have not seen Ultima Lucha with commentary, because the Ultima Lucha that we watched, we were doing live reactions over the commentary. So we're holding off to watch Ultima Lucha a second time until it's the appropriate week for this series, the Lucha rewatch.
Right.
So it's going to be incredible. I can't wait. But we know what some of the payoffs were, and we can use that knowledge to relate back to what happened in these early episodes, and some of it's great.
Oh my God, yes. Some of the payoffs that we got throughout this season, even before Ultima Lucha,
we've already talked about. Just looking at these first 4 episodes, we've already talked about the Johnny Mundo match, the Pentagon match, the Blue Demon match, the Phoenix match. We've literally talked about every single episode in Ultima Lucha Part 2, and one of the 3 matches in Ultima Lucha Part 1, because it's
right. Yeah, absolutely.
So like, that's just how intertwined this wrestling promotion is with itself. Like, it's so self-aware, it's so meta, it's so good at continuity. I don't even know. I'm so I want for every single week, I want for there to be as many mind blowers as hearing Matt Stryker say that they can go all night long was for us today.
Absolutely. The narrative consistency just blows my mind.
Yeah,
blows
absolutely.
my mind.
All right, guys. John, if you have anything else to add to just the discussion here, say it now. Otherwise, I'm out and we can end this.
Nah, brother, take us home.
All right, guys. This was Lucha Underground Rewatch. This was episode 1. Watching episodes 1 through 4. Don't forget to tweet as much as you can. Hashtag Netflix needs Lucha. I've been slacking a little bit lately, but for the longest time I was kind of stalking Netflix page, and they would put up like a picture of a scary face and be like, oh, hey, look how scary this face was. And I'd be like, ha, you think that face is scary? You should see Pentagon Jr. Hashtag Netflix needs Lucha. That kind of thing. Make it a game. That's kind of what I was doing. And I need to get back on that. But definitely get to tweeting. If you can find some kind of an email to get in touch with Netflix, do that. Do everything you can to try and get in touch with the Netflix people and really let them know just how badly they need Lucha Underground as a part of their programming selection. That being said, we'll be back for NXT tonight. That's going to be fun, and then lots of G1 over the weekend, and then we'll be back next Wednesday with Lucha Underground Rewatch episodes 5 through 8. So we'll see you all then.